Remember what I said, periodicals for consumer organizations.
Randy's tried various forms of communication devices, from a letterboard that's hand-tooled to a handy voice, but for right now, what he finds most effective is a child's toy that Texas Instruments puts out called Speak and Spell. Randy is really a perfect example of self-advocacy because he not only speaks and acts for himself, but he speaks for many other people who are disabled.
Okay, well, when we first started putting together this resource file,
he never really makes a big deal out of his physical limitation, and I think after a few interactions, people totally forget that he is disabled. Even when you're communicating with him on his letterboard, I swear sometimes I think he's talking. You change to a different way of receiving communication, and it becomes automatic. You also can understand what Randy has to say by watching his facial expression. He has a great deal of sensitivity in his eyes, and I think his inflection in his voice is, even when he's not saying the words, you can understand his point by merely listening to the inflection in his voice. I think Randy also has taught me a great deal about tolerance. On a daily basis, I'm sure that he has to tolerate a great deal more of our limitations than we have to from him, and he never really complains about it. I think both Jeff and I have put Randy into situations by our limitations that have made him very uncomfortable, and yet he laughs it off. And it doesn't take long at all to realize that the strengths of Randy are equal or greater than any person. He lives fairly independently. He has his own house, and he rents a car, which makes things easier for people that transport him. Randy has always had to fight for his independence. I think he was encouraged to use a wheelchair at one time and has always insisted on walking, and still does. He travels all over the country with us.
He's a sensitive man, but he's a very tough man, too. I've seen him take on the secretary of SRS, and I've seen him take on institutional superintendents when he knew that they were responsible for things that needed to be changed, and had gone down there and worked with them afterwards. But he's certainly not afraid to speak out and stand up.
Most of Randy's education was in the public school system. He went to college and got a degree in communications, and is now the project coordinator for a national significance project.
He will do everything physically possible that he can do. If Randy needs help, he'll ask for it. If he doesn't need help, he won't ask for it. If a person is working with him quite consistently and knows Randy's limitations and knows when exactly to fill in with help, it almost becomes routine, so that Randy really doesn't even need to ask. It becomes automatic.
If there's anything that Randy needs done especially, for instance, occasionally he'll need someone to help him shave his neck, he'll ask, and you never really have to be concerned about it. He takes care of his own needs. I think most of the time Randy does a lot of things to make up for the few things we do for him. He tries to pay back in many favors to us. It just works out to be a very cooperative effort. The first time I traveled with Randy, I think I was a little nervous about how much help Randy would be needing. And we had separate rooms, as we usually do. So I told Randy I'd come down and pick him up at 8 in the morning. And I fully expected to walk in and have to dress him and bathe him. And I arrived and Randy was already completely ready to go, except for a little help with his shirt, and I needed to brush his hair. He pretty much does everything else for himself. In many ways, Randy's an ideal traveling companion because he's very quiet, so he can get a lot of thinking done on the road.
His driving is something else. That was the one that just really slayed me. We were driving down the road from Kansas City, and Randy decided that he wanted to drive his car. And the way he drives his car is he sits on the passenger side, just reaches across with a magic toe and grabs a hold of that wheel and drives it for you.
Feeling the breeze, passing the car.
Randy really likes to travel a lot, consistently, likes to travel and meet people. And one of the main roles of this job and project is to travel and meet people. And in fact, his favorite song and he has said his own personal theme is Traveling Man.
Traveling man, catch if you can, but sooner than later I'm gone.
When I first met Randy, I picked him up at the airport in Kansas City, and he drove me all the way back to Lawrence to his house, and I was just totally amazed, not to mention scared.
With you working the accelerator.
Yeah, the driver works the accelerator and the brakes so that the process of driving becomes a real team effort.
Those are the memories that make me a wealthy soul. Those are the memories that make me a wealthy soul.
And he hopes that all of you express the issues that you want to and need to. I want to thank you.
Often, Jeff or I will tape his speech ahead of time to make it more understandable for audiences who can't spell or read very well. And it also makes it clear that the words are really Randy's own rather than our words.
Separate them from the so-called normal people in our society instead of just seeing and referring to them as human beings.
If you have any questions, feel free to just stand up and ask. Which one?
Does Randy stay alone in an apartment or a regular house?
The question was, does Randy stay alone in his house or does he have a roommate?
R-O-O-M-A-T-E.
Roommate.
And does he go anywhere alone?
Yes.
Randy travels with us all over the country, and sometimes he goes by himself, and sometimes one of us go with him. He lives with a roommate who helps him do some cooking and some housework, although minimal housework. And basically, Randy gets by himself almost all the time. So the first night we're there, we're gonna try to meet with the CIL people, right? And then the AMD presentation's on Tuesday.
Yeah, so we'll meet you at the airport on Sunday. Okay, what time are you coming in? Two o'clock. Okay. Do you want us to meet you at the airport or just meet you at the hotel? Okay.
Okay, good. And what I'd like to do first is meet with Jeff and Larry, right? Before we meet you at the airport. Is that good? Okay.
Yeah, after we pick you up, we plan on going back to the hotel and...
After communicating with Randy for just a few minutes on his letterboard or his speak and spell, you really forget that you're not conversing verbally. He has a lot of different ways to communicate.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah, some good people to work with.
Hello, Randy. I got your letter. I'm calling to make sure you want the message of this film to be changed from what we originally talked about. Okay. If I understand you right, what you want is not a film about yourself, Randy, but a film about the whole self-advocacy movement. Is that right? Okay. You realize you're giving up your chance to be a movie star. R-I-G-H-T. Then we'll try to tell the whole world about self-advocacy and let Randy Kitch stay in the background. Okay. T-H-A-N-K-S-A-N-D-L-A-T-E-R. Okay? We'll see ya. Bye.
Susan Eskridge. Susan Eskridge. Please come to the ticket counter at Delta Airlines.
Working for Randy is really unique. I do typing and the little tasks that I'm supposed to do, but those kinds of things are strange because really being Randy's secretary, I've learned a whole lot, and working during the day, it's more like an exchange of ideas rather than, would you please type this for me? The airport people are very accommodating. When we go to the airport, they always want to know what can be done to help.
People will see Randy, and obviously they aren't exposed to disabled people. Oftentimes the people will come up and ask Randy if they can help, and Randy will say no.
I think a lot of adults would like to just sit and stare at Randy or would like to come up and ask him some pointed questions, but they've got too many social conditionings that prohibit them from being that free. And a lot of children do just stare at Randy, but he seems to deal with it very comfortably. It's interesting to watch the way different adults react on first meeting. A lot of adults will sit down and start talking about 10 octaves higher or much decibels louder than they ordinarily do. And other people will just sit down and immediately assume that Randy will understand everything they say, which is great. But I really don't put people down for that, because I think even people that are educated in this field have a lot of problems dealing with the fact that there's people that are severely physically limited that have perfectly normal intelligence and functioning levels, and I think even the most educated of us have to deal with the fact that there's really no difference.
Randy will communicate with him with his speak and spell, that it's not something they have to be concerned about, that he can do everything himself, and they're usually pretty surprised if they haven't. A lot of them know Randy because he travels so much.
if they're going to serve a meal, Randy needs a little more room. A couple of them have even let him come up and eat on the floor in the cabin. The airlines, I think, in general, have been very good.
Extremely accommodating.
There's only been a couple of problems. One time, for instance, instead of taking us to a ramp, they took us to a staircase, and we had to go down 2 flights and up 2 flights back into the airport, which Randy handled just fine, but it just took a little more time. For the most part, the traveling has been fairly simple. Randy has to take off his shoe anytime he wants to communicate. Like in the car, he spells letters in the air with his foot, and so whenever we get out of the car, he has to take a minute or two to put his shoe back on. I think right now we're focusing quite a bit on groups that have been labeled mentally retarded because they have the greatest need for organizations at this point. There's several different types of organizations that are under that title, and that includes People First. Are most of you familiar with People First? That's just one of many. And what we've done is contact every state through the Protection and Advocacy Office, the ARCs, or directly through the consumers. And some of the states have already begun. Some are very sophisticated. For instance, Massachusetts has had groups for like 25 years. Other groups are just getting started. There's some groups located in institutional settings, some in community programs, some in groups' homes, some in sheltered workshops. So we work with a wide variety of different types of organizations. The primary goals of our project are to initiate self-advocacy groups and assist in getting those off the ground, which can be everything from going in and just exposing them to the self-advocacy concept to helping the groups organize by election of officers or helping them decide what issues they want to work on.
The two of us could handle an apartment if we got it.
Our second primary goal after the initiation stage would be to help them decide what direction they'd like to go, social activities, political advocacy, peer support, whatever, and we strictly facilitate. They call all the shots. The third major goal of our project is training, and depending on what the group requests, most of our training has been in areas like organizational skills, planning, assertiveness training, a little bit in sexuality. It really is very flexible depending on what the group wants. You have the right to have your own feelings and your own opinions and say what you think. We're working with a population who have never really been exposed to a lot of the skills and the opportunities that most of us just simply take for granted. I think many of the people that have been labeled retarded have never even been told that they have rights. And if they have, they're rarely allowed to act on those rights. In fact, I think most of the people are not even consulted about daily decisions like what to wear, what time to go to bed, what they want to eat. One of my greatest fears is that after we give one of our workshops on assertiveness or on standing up for yourself, that someone will end up being labeled non-compliant and thrown in a timeout room because they've been told, they tried to tell a staff person that they weren't ready for bed. And I think that's the main reason we've decided to include staff and professionals in a lot of our training.
Our grant deals mainly with developmental disabilities, and as Nancy mentioned, we're dealing at this point in time mainly with the greatest need population being people that are labeled mentally retarded. Together and see what
basically, we're trying to give the people an opportunity to simply come together and compare notes.
Is being assertive. If you have eye contact, you're telling the person what you mean. Okay. If you start screaming at your social worker or your counselor saying, I want a different kind of job, stomping your feet, yelling, it's not going to get you anywhere.
Right.
It's a very new kind of movement. Most of the groups that we're aware of have started within the last 5 years, and of that, most of them have started within the last 2 years, and groups are popping up all the time. One thing that people are realizing, people that receive services are realizing more and more, is that service-providing agencies cannot provide certain kinds of services. Impossible. Because it would be better for me to have a different kind of job. I'd have better skills.
We feel that it may be more effective if we can make it a more acceptable concept to everyone. The professionals that are threatened by self-advocacy are often willing to change their minds when they're included in some of the basic training. I think the feeling of isolation of some of these groups is overwhelming. They feel that they're the only people that are trying to change a big system, and the opportunity to come together and share their experiences is really a terrific opportunity.
There's no one model for a self-help group. Some groups want professionals to be involved. Other groups don't want anything to do with professionals.
We emphasize the basics of organization and planning, and most of our training is directed toward leadership, assertiveness, cooperation, basic rules of order. We do a lot of role-playing. It seems to make things more clear if they can act out what they're experiencing. You see a lot of staff participating in the role-playing, and I think it's crucial that they're involved and often can add a whole new insight into the whole process for themselves as well as the clients. So, Larry and Jeff, tell us about self-help in California. Whenever possible, we try to use local self-advocacy leaders in our presentations or workshops.
A very short history on myself, because we don't have that much time. Before I met self-advocacy and People First, I was very shy, I was very suicidal, I was a very unhappy person. Until I met People First self-advocacy. I will stick my whole life on this program, on self-advocacy and People First. Just, they have helped me a lot, a great deal. I'm a very happy person. At Sonoma State Hospital, Bob and Tridgen asked me to come and teach her class. I was very happy of that and visited her class. So I taught her class almost a year. I was trying to get a job being a teacher's assistant, so it didn't work out. So I got another job, which is called the Support Center People First. So now I'm a staff there. I'm assistant director, and I help the consumers out there.
What I'll do is I'll just get into a little background about myself, because part of my learning disability, part of my disability is reading, and I'm sitting here reading in front of you, and it gets kind of confusing at times. So what I am, I was, at 4 years old, I was marked as a borderline mentally retarded individual. And I, at that point, went through special education classes and did all of the things in special education classes, and became at the Community Association for the Retarded in Palo Alto, was a volunteer, and started working with other disability people in what's going on and getting really excited in what was happening.
He and Jeff and Nancy came out to make contact with some of the self-advocacy groups, and I work at Sonoma State Hospital Institution, 2,000 folks, not consumers or clients, but just people. So that was really heavy, and I think that's what you saw, was the people in the chairs, the people that couldn't talk, the people that had no communication systems, the people that were CP that probably, you know, were intellectually we're together, definitely.
Basics, milk, bread, laundry needs, hundreds of items. Aldi, goodness guaranteed, or your money back.
Reduce high electric bills. Add insulation to your home.
And Randy, I think, noticed the inaccessibility. We did have to get a wheelchair.
Self-advocacy has to be individualized. For some people, it's picking out what clothes they want to wear in the morning or making their own bed. It can be choosing whether you want to be alone or whether you want to be with other people.
One Life to Live will continue in a moment.
I know you're busy, but it's about the litter box problem. Oh, sure, you don't notice it. You're used to it. But what about your friends? Not to mention mine, huh? Try kitty litter.
Sometimes we as professionals are so busy setting limits on other people with our testing and labeling by IQ scores or classifications or whatever, that we forget our goal is to encourage independence at all levels and accept people for who they are. As hard as it is to take, I think it's really important that we visit institutions periodically. It always renews my motivation to fight for changes. I know what alternatives are possible, and so do many of the people who have to live in the institutions.
Okay. Bob's talking about that our People First group has... They came out to visit, tour the hospital, and meet with my citizenship class, which we learn about rights, self-advocacy. Plus, we had started a People First group. Their meetings. Is that, you're going to the meetings, is that what the whole group has done though? So they took a tour, and I think Jeff ended up in tears, and you were kind of angry, and Nancy was blown away, and I just thought it was a normal day.
Staying around the building all the time is no good. And he thinks it could be good. There's a greater possibility of us trying to do things on our own if we only have the chance to do it.
Mike? Yeah. If you can have their own transportation, then you can go out.
Right? And Larry Rice was very happy with it too.
He talked about how it feels how it felt. He talked about how his time as a resident of Sonoma State Hospital, and who's now a TA. He talked about when people were looking at him quite funny and saying, "Who? You? You?" And he showed us how to get things done, like the sidewalks, and curb cuts that we've gotten done. And the ramp, which we've gotten done for the auditorium. But most of all, Randy, we've learned to help ourselves.
Why? Why would you like to go out into the community?
My mother passed away a long time ago. My father did. My stepfather passed away. My mother passed away too, maybe a lot ago. Maybe my brother.
So otherwise, you feel like you can have, you are your own.
Things are changing. People who live in state institutions are now meeting with hospital administrators.
Joe Nicholson, my guardian. I want to be with him.
You want to be with your guardian?
Yeah.
You want to make your own decisions, but never had a chance to do so because someone else, either some professionals or your parents, has always made those decisions for you. It seems nobody will realize that you are capable of making those decisions.
Some states are now holding self-advocacy conventions, and the keynote speakers who they're bringing in are people who have themselves been labeled mentally retarded.
Which is a violation of your basic human and constitutional rights.
But we have an important message here, a message about handicapped citizens speaking for themselves. And that can be done through conferences and through meetings and through hearings. And that's a very important area that I want to talk to you about. There's a lot of decisions being made about you right now, whether you realize it or not, through hearings, through public hearings, state and federal hearings. We need you to go to these hearings.
Executive Director of the Texas Association for Retarded Citizens.
I keep hearing some of you who come from small communities where there are no programs. Well, the only way we're going to get programs in your community is to convince the legislature that we need these programs. And you can tell that message better than we. They expect the professionals to come and you know, plead for money and lobby for programs. But I think they would be immensely impressed with you and the kind of message. And I hope you will get involved in the legislative process, find out about these hearings. And there are all kinds of hearings that are going on constantly. Hearings on right to education and housing and any number of hearings. And I urge you to participate. And I hope that you will organize your efforts to do that, because those legislators make big decisions about your life, and you can help change their attitude.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to help people. I just like people.
How would you help them? How would you like to help them?
I would like to talk with them and just to talk to them and try to help them.
Okay.
It's been a lot of fun with some of the things I did with her, because she never did anything. She never got to hold a baby in her arms until she was 54 years old. She, all sorts of things that she had never done.
I was in the state schools all of my life. And I came home for Christmas one year, and I told my niece that I did not want to go back to the state schools at all.
All right. I think Marilyn had a question, and then now that'll be it.
A lot of self-advocacy advocates came. They attended the conference, and I hope they got something out of it, and they can go back into their communities and talk up or bring the concept of self-advocacy into their own communities. That's how I felt that my job was done, and it evidently was.
So you think this may be a springboard to even
Oh, definitely.
stronger organization?
I think I personally will have more requests to come in and provide training sessions, to provide technical assistance in formulating groups. I think my calendar from the next 3 to 4 months is going to be booked solid.
It's really hard to believe that some of the people emerging as leaders in this movement were at one time labeled as handicapped.
Absolutely, without question. Right.
Just because I'm retarded, it don't mean I can't do anything. It's just not me. I want to be treated like an equal. That's what I think. Sing it to me. We are family. We're having lots of fun now. My sisters and me. Get up and sing it to me. We are family.
You know, in some ways I find Randy one of the best friends you could have, because he's so accepting of anything you do or say. Because of the things he's been through, he doesn't put people down for their behavior. And you can go to him with any issue, and he's sensitive about it. In many ways, he's escaped some of the sexism and the kinds of things that have made a lot of men hard, because he's had to deal with it from a whole different approach. And his macho-ness isn't fake. He doesn't have to go through those kind of barriers. National Planning Convention was the first time the people most involved with the self-advocacy movement from all over the country were together. They represented all types of developmental disabilities, and not only did they work well together, they voted to form a permanent coalition. Self-advocacy really is a very new concept, and there's very little research, there's very little material out. We're really learning as we go. I think both Jeff and I experience more learning from a consumer convention than we do at a professional convention.
Take charge of your own life. Yeah. For advocates to try to dissolve and let the self-advocates be consumers for themselves and other people.
Okay, that's the future.
And we become our own self-advocate within time. We have many dreams. We call that...
Okay, more people living on their own. The main decision the folks made at the planning conference was to all work together to hold the 1981 convention in the Year of the Disabled, which would include everyone.
But our committee is most interested in having a real important dialogue, meaning we want to have a partnership in communications with the consumer, the client, the people who are really in the front lines of knowing what's happening in your local communities and state. It's been said here earlier that this is the first very pioneering movement of planning for a national conference.
The present committee, if they are going to a meeting this year after this convention, we should have more money for this training for the consumers. And so we can run this quote convention next year. Because it would look kind of sick if we did not run the meeting next year. And if it's going to be run by the advisors, what's the use coming to this meeting then? Okay, these conditions and examples show that their main need is.
The people chose what issues were of most concern, broke into teams, and then proposed their own goals for changing things.
We need education training to run this convention. It takes money to run this convention, and we do need help on this. Opportunities to use skills from training about rights. We were talking about earlier that the consumers knows their rights, but they are not using their rights. And they should know more about the rights. So, like, I'll give you an instance. I am having a 60-day notice to move out of my apartment, and I've been there for 3 years. And I'd like to know more about how can I handle that, and this is what we need help in. So that's kind of an example what we need. Exercising rights, speaking out, talking, taking responsibilities. It means that we should exercise our rights and take that responsibility and tell the public and the United States that we want to take that responsibility and to fight for our rights. And I want to thank you very much.
I'm going to let Nancy do the wrap-up because of time. Okay, let me just real quickly go over a couple of things with you. I think everybody did a fantastic job today. I think this is wonderful. After witnessing some of the dynamic consumer leaders that are all over this country, I'm totally convinced that it's going to be one of the most influential things in changing the future for people with disabilities.
I am for it. Are you all for this? Can we stand on this? Stand up and say, this is our country too.
And I think that all of us can have pride and feel a great accomplishment if we're able to come possibly to Washington.
The President's Committee on Mental Retardation co-sponsored the planning conference, and hopefully they will continue to listen to the voices of the people and encourage their involvement in the decision-making at a national level.
The professional, the people who are paid staff, are your partners in this, and will in time be probably less and less as that direction and power is transferred more to you. But at this point, we have to have a close working relationship. We have to have a sense of closer teamwork. I don't care where you come from, if it's Florida, if it's from New York, from Oregon, from Kansas here. If we do not have that type of close working relationship, we're going to lose the movement that has started in your states and here at this first national meeting.
And then tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 is the election of 10 groups which will maintain contact throughout the year to plan and facilitate and hopefully come up with a good convention that you can run all by yourselves in 1981.
There's a variety of projects that are going on and attempts to get people into the community. A very recent one is that we have 5 people that we've selected through an interview process that are going to be going into a federally supported job training program. And these people will be, when they get into this program, they'll be discharged from this hospital, except because they don't have a place to live right now, we're going to give them a room on the grounds here, 5 different rooms for them, and they're going to get a job on the grounds. And then within a 9-month period, they'll be trained to transition into a more independent setting in the community. But they'll be paid through Voc Rehab. They're going to be paid about $700 a month, which is really nice. And they'll do things like janitorial work and stock work in the storeroom, things like this. If they lived here, like these people, probably the average length of time that this group of people has been here is probably 30 years. And they probably 25 to 30 years. It's a big change for anybody.
Yeah, it is.
So.
And that's another thing I guess we find problems in is here is every time you talk to the residents and some of the side techs about moving people out in the community, they're kind of scared of, hey, Wayne, we can't do that because I'll lose my job. Well, if you move them out and kind of have them be...
Some of the people who have moved out of the institution and are now living in the community are coming back with realistic deinstitutionalization plans of their own.
I think you ought to come to that township group. I think before you leave today, you can get when the next meeting is and come to it and present this. This is really impressive.
I thought so.
So why don't you do that?
Trainer or teacher's aide, like in the classroom, where they can deal with the teacher and not just, let's say somebody that's independently comes in that's disabled and is more comfortable with working in the environment and goes to get a job, and the first thing it said is if you don't have a degree, you cannot work.
Like what happened with you, Larry?
Yeah.
Did it happen to you, Larry?
Yes, I was trying to apply for a job here to here, because I could commute with the residents here, and they communicated with me. You know that.
Yeah.
And I found out about that. And it was really good, and I enjoyed doing that. And it really kind of hurt me because I couldn't apply for the job because they told me I only could get a job as a janitor and be in a house when I could really, some of us do have good talents in that area and understand the people.
What are you doing now? What kind of work?
I am working in support center, People First in Marin.
Same type of work, but on the outside.
Oh, I see.
At the same time.
Do you do counseling with groups? And
yes, I do individual group individually mostly. We haven't done an individual group yet. It's just one-to-one base. Like I took a person in my home this past week. She was really upset and needed help. And she's okay now.
My dream would be to have people like Carol and Mike living together, cooking for each other, doing as much as they can, then them contracting out to therapists and staff people for things they can't do. They learn how to hire attendants. They learn how to do things for themselves. A very small program.
That's
Program
great. Yeah.
Okay, the answer is yes, that's possible. And in fact, we're making that, I hope it'll happen sometime in late summer. That's the first step. We only see it, another state hospital does down in Southern California, Fairview. They see it as a transition, that nobody can stay there longer than 9 months. And
they have that already.
Yeah, our worry right now is that after 9 months, there still won't be any place like for Mike, for example. Where do we go then? But we are moving on that one. I think that can happen soon.
That I have is they could also go out together, and if there isn't established staff group home, fine. Do their own apartment, learn about attendance, and go that way also.
How to go look for one.
Yeah, like you. I mean, you live by yourself. But you and 3 other people who have an attendant that they share expenses on could do it. Maybe.
And that's like I want you and I to live.
Like to have Larry and Andre's dream is to have a home where they have people from the hospital come live with them.
Yeah.
On a temporary basis, and they're training them, and then they'll get a new roommate.
Even on weekends.
This job requires a high level of emotional involvement. It's really a full-time commitment, not just punching a 40-hour-a-week time clock. I think Jeff and Randy and I have become a team in the true sense of the word. I really care about those guys. And the team has grown to include some pretty intimate friends who share the spirit of the movement at heart. It's always great when we're traveling to be able to stay with one of our friends rather than in a hotel. It gives us a chance to relax and share ideas and get revitalized so we can get ready to go out and hit the road again. We still have so much work to do, but it is an exciting beginning.
Hi. Thought you guys might like some coffee.
Thank you. We'll be up in 15 minutes or so. Maybe. We could take a lunch.
I was looking at the movement is people who understand about alternatives and people who understand about changing environments and spaces and adjustments and adaptions and flexibility for whether it's your disabled, whether it's your own, whether it's your whatever. That's why communities, communication is important. If people don't open up, things won't be developed. What do you think? I don't know, but you want, but you wait until, you want until, you tell me. Communication was opening up. You know, the key to the movement, one of the keys to the movement was communication. I see it more like being able to see alternatives, not having normal be such a narrow thing. It seems like, especially in this country, we've spent so much time defining middle class and defining normal that we've X'd out so much. We've said so many things can't be tolerated. People, kinds of people, ages, colors, everything. We have to open up our sensibilities.
When you are